Welcome back, viewers, to the Personal Injury Show. We're talking about a topic which has affected a lot of Australians and unfortunately will affect a lot more of Australians, asbestos in Australia. Tony, in particular, there's this situation where in around 2020, we're going to have over 22,000 people being affected by asbestos.
John, that's an estimate that's made by... They've got stats and they think that by the year 2020 there'll be 22,000 people affected by it. But not only affected, this is probably an estimate of people they think are going to die from the condition.
It's disastrous.
So it is disastrous. But the worst part about it is it doesn't only pick up workers, also spouses that are washing the overalls, maybe children. You know, anyone that was exposed to it.
Any person susceptible to it.
That's exactly right.
Now, these people have rights under Victorian legislation and Australian legislation, Tony?
They do. Just before we get to that legislation, just quickly, I want to mention that in 1985, Harold Pilmer was the first victim to successfully sue for common law damages in Australia, and he was against a firm called McPherson Limited. That was in the Supreme Court of Victoria, and it was $200,000, which is what he received. Now, prior to that, there'd been numerous cases in Western Australia, but due to political reasons, they never succeeded. So they brought him over to Victoria. That case went to court and it won. Then in 2008, there was another big case of Lepresti where this fellow who was exposed to asbestos in brake linings got $840,000. The Victorian government's made some amendments to the legislation and said, what's the bill say?
Well, basically, they've introduced this bill as of 2008, or now it's an act. It's the Asbestos Diseases Compensation Act. Basically, to give those exposed to asbestos more rights, and it affects both the Wrongs Act and also the Accident Compensation Act. With regard to the Wrongs Act, I'll comment upon that, John. Basically, it gives dependents the right to seek further compensation for the deceased loss of earnings, even though obviously they had passed away and it may have been contracted later on.
So there's provisional damages in the first application, and if your claim was settled after the bill came into effect, that is legislation, you've got a right to pursue a further claim down the track.
Yeah, so look, it's a good, I think, scheme introduced by the government, and I do commend them on that.
And John, from an accident comp point of view?
From a work cover point of view, again, a worker, if they find years later that they're suffering from this condition, court proceedings should be issued immediately, application made in the Supreme Court to have the speedy, urgent hearing whereby the claim and the damages claim can be heard as soon as possible, Tony.
Well, you've got to make the application within 30 days.
Exactly.
So now, in the matter of Amarca and Proprietary Limited and others and Alice, the High Court made a pronunciation in relation to the issue of causation. What did they say in that case, Nance?
Well, basically, they said that on the balance of probabilities, you have to prove that the exposure caused the disease, and not that it may have caused the disease. The background to this case is that this particular plaintiff had been smoking also for 26 years. So, attributing the asbestos and also the smoking to the injury was an issue in itself.
Tough case.
Yeah.
John, balance of probs, what's that mean?
On the balance of probabilities, Tony, that more likely than not, what you're saying has occurred.
So you only have to tip the scales by 1%, don't you?
Exactly.
So 50-50, knock it over by 1%.
Exactly.
And you get over the line.
You've got the scales of justice, Tony.
That's
and
it.
hopefully the scales tip in your way.
That's it. So in effect, what you've got to do is you've got to show that
There was
the exposure caused the condition.
Exactly.
But it didn't have to be the only cause.
No.
Is that how you read it?
Exactly right.
Exactly.
And there was another case of Lorraine Fay Sim. Who wants to tell me about the facts of that case?
Well, Tony, in that matter of Lorraine Fay Sim, she was the widow of a man who died in June 2009 after having developed asbestosis. It was a very difficult claim as to the facts, wasn't it, Tony?
On the facts, it was very messy, but there'd been quite a few cases against that firm in the past.
Of course, and the complicated fact of this case was that there was 3 different employers. So who do you attribute the asbestos exposure to? And that was
Well, she sued everyone.
Yeah, she did, and I think that was a smart thing to do.
And there was quite a few insurers involved too.
Of course, look, it was a party there, party of insurers.
And there was a bit of a cover-up in terms of information and knowledge and what was said, what wasn't said. But also, there was masks provided in this case. What did they...
There were masks provided, but they weren't suitable, and that's where the negligence came. They weren't susceptible and didn't prevent the exposure of the asbestos fibres, and that was found to be the case, and that's why damages, I think, in excess of 400,000 were awarded.
$400,000.
Yeah.
And there was also this article introduced into the case about how many the exposure to asbestos, and
Accepted particles, I think.
yeah,
can
the
be,
accepted particles and
However, the tribunal found in the end, they didn't accept that evidence, did they, Tony?
no, well, they said it speaks for itself that this bloke's coughing and you know his mask is caked with asbestos
And that
dust.
the employment of each defendant had contributed
Exactly
to
right.
this condition.
You know, also of significance, these claims, you don't have to contract a disease straight away.
No.
Most of them come after how many years? 20,
Exactly.
30?
2030 at
20,
times, yeah.
20 to 30 years, Tony.
And does it matter that the company's gone out of business?
No, because generally look, there is an insurance company in the background, and that information can be readily accessible if you make the relevant investigations.
And how would you prove a case like this? You'd need to...
You'd have to do a lot of fact finding and go back in time, Tony, and find who the employer was, who the insurers are, but also the medical evidence, Tony.
fellow employees.
Exactly. Witnesses, damages trial, as you know, Tony, it's a very complicated matter. However, witnesses, the medical evidence of not only the general practitioner but specialists in the area. And as you know, Tony, there's not many specialists in this area, is there?
No. But the thing is this, you could also advertise for witnesses, couldn't you?
Exactly, and you sometimes see that in the paper, don't you,
You
Tony?
do. I actually had a story in the paper the other day about bullying of a particular police officer, and I had 2 witnesses come forward. Yeah. And that was just, people trying to do the right thing.
Witnesses are crucial, and as that last case we discussed, Lorraine Sim, I think there was at least 4 or 5 there had affidavit evidence, and you can't buy that kind of supporting evidence.
So if you've got someone that's been exposed to asbestos in some shape or form, and I'm not only talking about the workers, what about the partner?
Family, children, they're all potential applicants for compensation in the future, Tony.
What do? You're experiencing difficulties breathing, I guess, or coughing all the time?
Look, the main part obviously is seek medical treatment, but then also once that's sorted, you should speak to a lawyer because you got to know what your rights
You
are.
need to see a lawyer as soon as you find out the condition. Otherwise, you may lose your chance.
And I think they can discover whether you've got asbestos or mesothelioma just by doing X-rays. It shows up on X-rays. Okay, look, Nuncio, thanks for coming on board again. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it. Yeah.
Good evening.
And viewers, we're going to a sponsors break and we'll be back with Kathy's mailbag. So please stay tuned, don't go away.